The rain had been falling since dawn. A steady, cold drizzle blanketed Manhattan, making even the most impatient New Yorkers slow their steps. On Delancey Street, the usual rhythm of the Lower East Side was dulled, storefronts reflected smeared neon, steam curled from subway grates, and umbrellas bobbed like restless petals down the sidewalk. Under a scaffolding near the corner deli, Miguel stood still. No umbrella. No destination. His hoodie was soaked, and his jeans stuck to his legs like damp cardboard. The world moved around him, indifferent and fast. His hands, calloused and cracked, trembled slightly, not from the cold, but from something deeper: hunger, exhaustion, and a quiet, growing shame. Miguel had once painted apartments in this very neighborhood. He remembered the texture of drywall under his fingertips, the smell of fresh plaster, the satisfaction of leaving a room smoother than when he found it. That was years ago. Before the back injury. Before the eviction. Before the shelter. Now, most days, he avoided people. He hated the way they looked through him. Or worse, when they didn't look at all, but today felt different. Maybe it was the rain. Or maybe he was just too tired to care anymore. He spotted her from a distance, surrounded by staff, emerging from a small civic center down the block. Alexandria. Ocasio-Cortez, recognizable even through the mist, her presence somehow commanding but unpretentious. She wore a navy blue trench coat, her hair tied back, speaking softly to a man beside her. Miguel didn't plan it. His body just moved. He stepped onto the sidewalk, walking with unsure steps. AOC noticed him before anyone else did. He stopped a few feet from her. "Excuse me," his voice barely rose above the traffic. "Can you spare some change?" There was a moment, a beat of stillness. One of her aides took a step forward, about to intervene, but AOC raised her hand subtly. She turned to face Miguel. She didn't look startled or annoyed. She simply looked present. "What's your name?" she asked, tilting her head slightly, and Miguel blinked. No one had asked that in weeks. "Maybe months." "Miguel," he said quietly. "Just Miguel." He waited for her to say thank you and walk away. Politely. Like everyone else, but she didn't. Instead, she looked him in the eyes and asked, "Have you eaten today?" Miguel hesitated. "Not really. I mean, I had a muffin. Someone gave me this morning." AOC glanced at the cafe behind them. She turned to her staff. "Give me a few minutes," she said. "Miguel," she gestured toward the door, "do you mind having a coffee with me?" He stared at her, unsure if he had heard correctly. Was this a joke? A test, but the sincerity in her eyes broke through his doubt. He nodded. They walked inside together. The barista froze as AOC entered, doing a double take. Miguel followed her, dripping wet. She ordered 2 coffees, black, and added a toasted sandwich for him. They sat near the window. Rain streaked the glass beside them. No cameras. No press. Just 2 people at a Formica table, sharing space in a city known for isolation. AOC stirred her coffee slowly. "So," she said, "tell me what happened." Miguel swallowed hard. The words came out in fragments. He talked about working construction. About falling from a ladder, about the bills, the eviction, the nights on benches, the shelters that smelled like bleach and fear. She didn't interrupt. She didn't flinch. At one point, he stopped mid-sentence. "Why are you even talking to me?" he asked, voice thin. "Most people look the other way." AOC took a sip of her coffee, her expression thoughtful. "Because you're not invisible, Miguel," she said. "You're a person. And sometimes all it takes to change a life is for someone to notice." Miguel looked down, ashamed of the tears forming in his eyes. "I don't want to beg," he muttered. "I want to work. I just don't know where to start anymore." She nodded. "I might know someone who can help. But only if you want to try." Miguel looked up. This wasn't pity. It wasn't politics. It was human, and in that moment, for The first time in a long time, Miguel felt something unfamiliar in his chest. Hope the small cafe on Delancey Street wasn't used to this kind of attention. As soon as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez walked in, a few heads turned, and one man fumbled to open his phone camera. But something about the way she moved, calm, unhurried, unguarded, discouraged interruption. She wasn't here for show. Miguel sat across from her, unsure where to place his hands. He kept them curled around his coffee cup like it was the only thing keeping him anchored. Outside, the rain kept falling, tapping gently against the window. Inside, a quiet tension lingered, not the uncomfortable kind, but the kind that settles between two people when something unspoken begins to shift. I used to paint apartments near here, Miguel said after a long pause. 10, 12 hours a day. Nothing fancy. But I was good. AOC nodded slowly. What happened? He looked out the window. Fell from a ladder. Back never healed right. Couldn't carry drywall anymore. Boss said he'd call me when something lighter came up. He never did. Miguel didn't speak with bitterness. Just fatigue. A quiet resignation that only comes from living too long with disappointment. He told her about the medical debt, how one visit turned into 5 collection calls a day. How he tried to keep the apartment, even sold his tools to pay rent. How eventually, the lights were shut off, and then the locks changed. I went from being tired to being gone, he said to AOC, leaned forward, elbows on the table. You ever try the shelters?
Yeah.
He nodded. Some are okay. Most are chaos. I got jumped twice. Sometimes it's safer on the street. He paused. Funny thing is, you start to disappear. First from your job. Then your neighbors. Then yourself. She didn't speak right away. Instead, she studied his face with a quiet intensity. I know that kind of invisibility, she said. Finally. Not the same way, maybe. But I remember when my dad died, my mom working double shifts, me holding it together at school. There were weeks we didn't know if we'd eat a hot meal. People didn't see us either. Miguel tilted his head. And now they see you everywhere. She smiled faintly. Not always in the way I want. At the next table, a man coughed loudly and muttered something under his breath, something about cameras and staged sympathy. Miguel stiffened, ready to get up. To AOC didn't move. Instead, she glanced calmly in the direction of the man and said, without raising her voice, you don't need a photo to show up for someone. The man looked away and Miguel blinked. You didn't have to do that. She shrugged. I'm tired of the idea that empathy is performative. It's not weakness to care. They sat quietly for a moment. The sandwich she ordered for him had gone cold, but he didn't care. His stomach was still twisting, part nerves, part hunger, part something else he hadn't felt in a while, dignity. Eventually, she reached into her coat and pulled out a small notepad. She scribbled something down. There's a community center 2 blocks from here. They do job training, referrals, all kinds of stuff. I want you to meet someone there. Her name's Jasmine. Miguel looked at the note. I've tried those places before. I'm not saying it'll fix everything, she replied. But it's a step. I'll go with you, if you want. He looked at her again, unsure of what he was supposed to feel. Trust? Gratitude? Suspicion. He settled on honesty. I'm scared, he said. Of hoping again. She nodded. Hope's not naive, Miguel. Giving up is easier. But this city needs people like you. It needs men who build things. Who show up. Who just need someone to remind them they matter. The rain had finally started to lighten outside. Miguel looked at his reflection in the window, wet hoodie, scruffy beard, eyes that looked a decade older than they should. He pocketed the note. All right, he said. Let's go. They stood, and for the first time in a long time, Miguel didn't feel like a man waiting for something to be handed to him. He felt like a man walking towards something, and as they stepped back into the soft drizzle, side by side, New York felt, just for a moment, like it had room for second chances. The community center sat on the corner of East Houston Street, nestled between a closed-down laundromat and a dollar store. From the outside, it looked unremarkable: peeling paint, flickering overhead sign, a dented bench out front. But as Miguel stepped through the doors, something shifted. It was warm. Clean. Busy. The hallway buzzed with quiet voices and the smell of old paper and burnt coffee. Posters lined the walls: resume help, free legal aid, vocational skills training. A mural near the entrance read, "People don't need saving. They need support." Alexandria greeted the receptionist like an old friend. And within minutes, they were introduced to Jasmine, early 30s, cropped hair, clipboard in hand, wearing sneakers and an easy smile. "You must be Miguel," she said, extending a hand without hesitation. "Come on, let's find a spot to chat." They sat in a small office with mismatched chairs and a desk cluttered with folders. Miguel hesitated, glancing at AOC. "You can stay," he mumbled. Alexandria sat quietly in the corner, arms crossed loosely, letting Miguel speak without pressure. "So," Jasmine began, "what do you want right now?" "Not in the abstract. Today. This week." Miguel rubbed his chin. "I want to stop sleeping on a bench." "Okay," Jasmine said. "Let's start there." Over the next 40 minutes, she asked questions. Gently, but directly. Did he have ID? No. Did he have any open warrants? 1. Unpaid subway fare. Was he sober? Yes, almost a year. Bit by bit, Miguel answered. Not because he trusted her, not yet, but because she didn't treat him like a burden. She treated him like someone who mattered. Then came the hard part. Jasmine slid a pamphlet across the desk. "There's a training course starting next week. 4 weeks, hands-on, basic maintenance and repair. You'd get a certificate and referrals to employers we partner with." Miguel looked at it. "Is it free?" She nodded. "If you commit. Daily attendance. Clean urinalysis. Weekly check-ins." He looked down. "I haven't worked in years. I don't know if I still have it in me." From the corner, AOC finally spoke. "You built homes, Miguel. You carried weight most people can't imagine. You survived losing everything. Trust me, you have it in you." Miguel looked at Jasmine. "What if I fail?" Jasmine leaned forward. "Then you come back. And we try again." It wasn't motivational fluff. It was simple. Practical. A real offer. Miguel exhaled sharply. He wasn't used to people being patient. "Can I think about it?" "Of course," Jasmine said. "But the list fills up fast." Outside, the rain had stopped. The sky remained gray, but softer now, as if the city itself were catching its breath. They walked back toward Delancey Street. Miguel stayed quiet. The AOC glanced sideways. "You don't owe me anything, Miguel. Whether you go or not." He shook his head. "It's not that. It's just I forgot what it felt like to be seen. It's overwhelming." She stopped walking. Looked at him, really looked. "You were never invisible. The system just stopped looking. That's not your fault." He nodded. Then, softly, "I think I'm gonna do it." AOC smiled, and for the first time since they'd met, Miguel smiled back. Monday came colder than expected. The sun barely pierced through the pale morning haze, and the sidewalks were still slick from the weekend's rain. Miguel sat on the edge of his cot at the shelter, staring at the scuffed tips of his boots. Around him, other men shuffled about, some hungover, others muttering to themselves, others already gone, off chasing something that might or might not be hoped. He still wasn't sure if he believed in any of this. But he remembered Jasmine's face. And Alexandria's words, "You built homes. You carried weight most people can't imagine." That sentence had stayed with him like a splinter in the soul. By 8:15, he stood in front of the community center, hands stuffed in his jacket. Heart pounding. The building looked smaller now, less significant. But what it represented felt enormous. He pushed the door open. Inside, Jasmine greeted him without surprise. "Miguel," she smiled. "You made it." He nodded, still unsure what to say. The training program didn't start with tools or drills. It started with questions. Personal ones. Emotional ones. There were 7 others in the room, men and women, different ages, all with that same weary caution in their eyes. A counselor led them in introductions. When it was Miguel's turn, he hesitated. "My name's Miguel," he said finally. "I used to be a painter. Drywall. Plaster. I haven't worked in a long time. But I want to again. That's why I'm here." There was a pause. No applause. Just respectful silence. That afternoon, he held a hammer for the first time in years. It felt heavier than he remembered. But familiar. He didn't talk much that first week. He listened. Observed. Took notes even when no one asked him to. Jasmine noticed. So did one of the instructors, a retired carpenter named Russ. "You've done this before," Russ said one day, watching Miguel cut drywall with careful precision. "Long time ago," Miguel replied. "You haven't forgotten." Miguel said nothing. But he smiled. By the second week, something began to shift, not just in Miguel, but in the way the others looked at him. No longer as a stranger, but as someone they could learn from. He stayed late one night, helping a younger trainee understand how to level a doorframe. When Jasmine saw them, she didn't interrupt. She just observed, jotting something in her notes. Later, she approached him. "You know you're helping more than just yourself, right?" Miguel shrugged. "I don't want to be anyone's hero." "You're not," she said softly. "You're a reminder that it's still possible." That night, Miguel didn't return to the shelter. He stayed in a temporary bed the center offered. It was cramped, the sheets were thin, but it was his name on the clipboard at check-in. His signature. For the first time in years, he slept indoors. By choice. The following day, during a break, Jasmine handed him a manila folder. "What's this?" he asked. "Your resume draft. Based on what you told us." He opened it. His name, in bold. A list of skills. Past employers. It felt surreal, like looking at a version of himself that he'd lost and forgotten. Later that week, a staff member called out during lunch. "Miguel, someone left you a note. It was handwritten. Heard you started the program. Proud of you. AOC." He held the note in his hand for a long time. Not because it changed anything, but because it meant someone out there still remembered him. Still believed, and belief, he realized, might be the rarest currency of all. By the third week, Miguel had found a rhythm. He arrived early to the community center, often before the doors were unlocked. While the others filtered in slowly, rubbing sleep from their eyes or complaining about the weak coffee, Miguel was already unrolling extension cords, checking power tools, wiping down workstations. There was something sacred in the routine. Something stabilizing. He hadn't had that in years. Russ, the instructor, took notice. "You don't talk much," he said one afternoon as they installed a mock drywall panel. "But you work like someone who remembers what this feels like." Miguel gave a half smile. "My body remembers more than my mind does." "You ever think about teaching this stuff?" Miguel looked at him, startled. "Me?" Russ nodded. "You've got patience. You don't rush the work. That's rare." The comment stayed with Miguel long after the drill was packed away. The idea of being useful not just as a worker, but as a mentor, felt foreign. And maybe dangerous. Hope was slippery like that. It climbed into your chest quietly, and then you feared what would happen if it fell again. That night, back in his assigned bunk at the center, Miguel stared at the ceiling for hours. He wasn't used to things going well. Every time something had gone right in the past, something worse had followed. That was how the world worked, at least, his world. But the next morning, something shifted. Jasmine pulled him aside after class and handed him a sealed envelope. "Your certificate," she said. Inside, a clean document with a gold embossed seal read, "Certified Maintenance Technician, Level 1. His name, Miguel A. Ruiz, was typed in bold. For a moment, he didn't move. Then he sat down slowly, eyes fixed on the paper. I haven't had my name on anything in years, he whispered. Jasmine smiled. Get used to it. That week, a new challenge arrived. The center had partnered with a local nonprofit housing project. They needed help finishing repairs on a small multifamily home in the Bronx before winter. Jasmine asked if Miguel would be willing to assist. It's volunteer, she explained. But they'll write you a letter of recommendation. Miguel didn't hesitate. The site was nothing glamorous. The house had mold in the basement, broken tiles in the kitchen, and a leaking roof. But to Miguel, it felt like a return to the world. The real world. Not the waiting rooms of shelters or the low hum of fluorescent lights in overcrowded lobbies, but the scent of sawdust, the weight of a tool belt, the silent rhythm of fixing something with your own hands. That he worked alongside 2 younger trainees. And a man named Leon, a former union carpenter who had lost his leg in an accident and now volunteered part-time. You don't talk like a beginner, Leon said as they leveled a countertop. I'm not, Miguel replied. I'm just starting over. And yet, with every nail set properly, with every joint aligned, Miguel felt something creeping back that he hadn't trusted in a long time. Pride Day. The end of the week, Jasmine called him into her office. We got a message from one of our partners, she said. A housing rehab company is hiring for part-time roles, low-risk jobs, mostly interior repairs. I recommended you. Miguel's throat tightened. You think I'm ready? I know you're ready, Jasmine said. She handed him the job posting and a scheduled interview time. You've got a certificate, a reference, and real hours on a site, she said. You're not asking for a favor. You're offering value. He looked at the paper, then at her. What if they say no? She didn't smile. She didn't coddle. Then we keep going. You've already proved something more important. Miguel nodded slowly. Folded the paper. Slipped it into his jacket pocket like it was glass. That night, as he walked back to the temporary housing dorm, something strange happened. He looked up. The sky was still heavy with winter clouds, the streets still cracked and cluttered. But above him, between the buildings, a small gap had opened at a patch of clear sky, and in that gap, for the first time in what felt like forever, stars. They were faint. Almost drowned by the city's glow, but they were there, and so was he, still. Here, still trying, still rising. The subway car rocked gently as it sped beneath the city. Miguel sat near the back, hands gripping a worn leather folder Jasmine had given him. Inside were 3 copies of his new resume, his maintenance certificate, and a letter of reference with the community center's logo at the top. He wore a navy blazer that was a size too big and shoes someone had donated the week before, scuffed, but clean. His hair had been trimmed at a barbershop that partnered with the shelter. He hadn't owned a mirror in months, but when he caught his reflection in the train window, he didn't flinch. He almost looked like himself again, but beneath the fabric of those borrowed clothes, his stomach churned. It had been over 5 years since his last formal job interview. 5 years of benches. Of hiding from the cold. Of waiting in lines for meals. Of swallowing pride again and again until pride no longer tasted like anything. Now, he was expected to sit across from someone with a clipboard and explain that he was trustworthy. Reliable. Worth hiring. The irony burned. The building was a squat, red brick structure in Queens, tucked between a mechanic's garage and a Dominican bakery. The sign above the door read, Urban Renewal Solutions. Inside, it smelled faintly of paint thinner and paper coffee cups. A receptionist welcomed him. You're Miguel Ruiz? Yes. Take a seat. Mr. Farley will be right with you. He sat on the edge of the vinyl chair, folder in hand. He tried to breathe steadily, to remember the tips Jasmine had drilled into him. Look people in the eye. Don't overshare. Be honest, but don't apologize for your life. You're not here to beg. You're here to offer value. Still, the silence of the waiting room pressed on his chest like a weight. A door opened. Miguel? A man said, tall, late 50s, gray buzzcut, firm handshake. His name was Mark Farley, site supervisor. They sat across from each other in a small office. Miguel laid the folder carefully on the desk, sliding it forward. Farley flipped through it quickly. So, he said. Tell me what brings you here. Miguel cleared his throat. I've worked construction most of my life, plaster, drywall, tile, minor plumbing. I lost work after a back injury. It took me a while to get back on my feet. He hesitated. I'm not perfect. But I show up. I work hard. I fix what's broken. That's what I know how to do. Farley studied him for a moment. Not suspicious. Just assessing. Russ from the training program said good things about you. Said you work quiet and precise. That true? Miguel nodded. I don't like rushing work. You miss details that way. Farley leaned back in his chair. You ever work with asbestos mitigation? Not certified, Miguel said. But I've done prep and cleanup under supervision. Good, Farley replied. We've got an old site near Crown Heights. Basement needs leveling and sealing. Might bring you in part-time, see how you do. Miguel's heart pounded. Is that an offer? Farley cracked a small smile. It's a test run. We don't promise anything long-term until we see how you work in the field. Miguel nodded quickly. Understood. I'm ready. Farley extended his hand. Then we'll see you Monday. Bring that steady hand with you. Miguel walked out of the building in a daze. The sun was out, bright, sharp, cold against his skin. He stepped to the sidewalk and stood still. Just breathing. A group of school kids passed him on scooters. A man sold roasted nuts from a cart across the street. A dog barked from an open window above, and in the middle of it all, Miguel Ruiz stood. Frozen with a folded paper in his hand, an orientation schedule, and a heart beating faster than it had in years. That he didn't cheer, that he didn't smile, that he just breathed, because sometimes survival isn't loud, sometimes it's silent. Slow. Measured, like planting a seed and not knowing if it will bloom, but watering it anyway. Crown Heights still slept when Miguel arrived. The job site was an aging two-family home at the end of a quiet residential block, its facade flaking, the front yard tangled in overgrown weeds. A thin fog hovered low across the pavement, and the sharp morning air made Miguel's knuckles sting. He stood at the gate for a moment, unsure if he belonged. Then the crew truck pulled up. 4 men stepped out, all in matching navy jackets with the company's logo stitched on the chest. One of them looked at Miguel, then down at his clothes, still presentable, but clearly secondhand. You here for Farley? The man asked. Yes. Miguel Ruiz. They nodded him through without a smile, without a welcome. Just silence inside. The house was colder than the street. Floorboards creaked with every step. The smell of mildew and decades-old insulation clung to the air. Farley arrived 10 minutes later, clipboard in hand. Morning, Ruiz, he said. You'll be shadowing Devin and Travis. Today's all prep. We're clearing the basement, treating the lower wall, and sealing the subfloor. It's dirty work. I'm not afraid of dirt, Miguel replied. Farley cracked a grin. We'll see. The work was physical. Brutally so. Miguel spent the first 3 hours hunched in the dim basement, scraping grime off concrete walls, hauling out rusted piping, and dodging old wiring. Sweat soaked his undershirt. Dust coated his face like ash. His lower back throbbed. But he didn't stop, not once. He listened more than he spoke. Watched how the others worked, how they moved, how they communicated in half sentences and shoulder gestures. He matched their pace. Never faster, never slower, but he felt the stares, the silent evaluations. Devin, a younger man with a hard jaw and short fuse, watched him often. During a break, Devin finally said it out loud. You're the guy from that shelter program, right? Miguel paused, water bottle halfway to his lips.
Yeah.
Devin wiped sweat from his neck with a rag. They sent another guy like you last month. He lasted 2 days. Miguel said nothing. Devin shrugged. Nothing personal. Just saying, this work ain't charity. Miguel looked him in the eye, not defensive, not hostile, just calm. I know, he said. That's why I'm here. They kept going. By noon, Miguel's shirt clung to his body like wet canvas. His knees ached. His right shoulder buzzed with dull pain. But he didn't complain. He double-checked his cuts, retightened loose screws, cleaned up his workspace without being asked. At 1 point, Travis, an older man with a cigarette habit and a quiet demeanor, nudged Devin and said, "He works cleaner than half the new hires." Devin didn't respond. But he didn't argue either. At 4:45 p.m., Farley returned. He walked through the basement, inspecting the day's progress. Miguel stood quietly as Farley examined the panels Miguel had sealed. He ran a gloved finger along the wall, checked for gaps, measured spacing, then he turned to Miguel. "You did this?" Miguel nodded. Farley gave a short grunt. "You've got steady hands. And you didn't quit." "Most do on the first day." Miguel waited, unsure what that meant. Farley wrote something on the clipboard. "See you tomorrow. Same time." No handshake. No smile. Just that, but for Miguel, it was enough. He walked back to the subway in silence, boots heavy with dried cement, palms raw, but chest fuller than it had been in years. No one clapped. No one called his name, but beneath the grime and exhaustion, something bloomed, a quiet kind of pride. The kind you don't post online. The kind you carry in your spine. That night, in the small dormitory room above the community center, Miguel removed his boots carefully, massaging his aching heels. Then he pulled the folded paper from his pocket, the orientation schedule from a week before, and scribbled in the margin, "Day 1, survived. Not broken. Not invisible. Still here." 3 days had passed since Miguel's last shift at the job site. Each morning, he had woken up early, dressed in the same faded jeans and second-hand jacket, and waited by the phone. He checked the volume, checked the battery, moved it from pocket to table to window ledge, hoping maybe better reception would bring the call faster, but nothing came. No message. No number. No sign. He went back to the community center, helped with odd jobs, replacing loose tiles, organizing storage, painting a hallway no one really used. Jasmine watched him closely. She could see the difference, not in how he moved, but in how he didn't move. The energy he'd found just a week ago had faded. Not disappeared, just dulled, like a light behind a foggy glass. That Thursday, Miguel walked by the job site in Crown Heights. He didn't go in. He just watched from across the street. Devin was there. So was Travis. And Farley. Working at No one noticed him. Or maybe they did, and chose not to. Back at the center, Jasmine found him sitting on the back steps, hunched forward, elbows on his knees, eyes on the ground. "They didn't call," he said before she could speak. Jasmine sat down beside him, wordless at first. I thought I had it this time," he added, voice low. "You did have it," she said. "You do." Miguel laughed bitterly. "If that were true, I wouldn't be back here fixing storage closets." She turned to face him. "This isn't failure, Miguel. This is just one answer that hasn't come yet." "That's not the same thing." He didn't respond. "I know what it feels like to wait for something and think silence means rejection. But it doesn't. Not always." Still, Miguel didn't look at her. Then she added, softly, "Even if it does, we don't stop." The next day, she handed him a work order. The center needed help repairing light fixtures and updating the emergency exit signs. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't even outdoors, but it was something, and Miguel, without a word, took the tools and got to work. He didn't smile. But he showed up. Every hour. Every task. Every nail. On Friday, just as he was finishing a rewiring job, Jasmine approached him with an envelope. "It came this morning," she said. "From Urban Renewal." Miguel wiped his hands on his shirt. His heart kicked once in his chest, but he didn't move. He just stared at the envelope. "You want me to open it?" Jasmine offered. He nodded. She unfolded the letter and read quietly, then looked up with a small smile. "They want you back," she said. "Farley asked for you specifically." Miguel exhaled, like someone surfacing from deep water. He didn't celebrate. Didn't shout. He just let his shoulders relax for the first time in days. That night, Miguel sat alone in the dormitory, still in work clothes, boots by the bed. He stared at the wall for a long time, the letter on the nightstand beside him. He didn't need to write anything down, because this time, he knew he'd remember. This was the moment he didn't give up, and it made all the difference. On Monday morning, Miguel was the first to arrive at the job site. The street was still quiet, the houses bathed in early light. He stood at the gate, hands in his pockets, breathing slowly. The ache in his back was familiar now, less pain, more reminder. A reminder that he was alive, working, moving, and Travis was already there, sitting on a cinder block with his thermos in hand. He looked up when Miguel approached, but didn't say anything for a moment. Then, with a slow nod, he said, "You came back." Miguel nodded back. "I said I would." Travis sipped his coffee. "Good. We need people who show up." Inside, not much had changed. The air still smelled of plaster and sawdust. The floors were still uneven. But something was different. Miguel moved with purpose. He no longer had to ask where tools were kept or how the team communicated. He had found the rhythm, and now, he was part of it. Farley showed up around 8. When he saw Miguel already laying out tarps and prepping the walls, he gave a brief, approving grunt, then no speech. No welcome party, just trust, and that was more than enough. They worked all day repairing drywall, sanding corners, sealing old window frames. Devin kept his distance at first, but during lunch, he sat beside Miguel and asked, casually, "You ever done marble tile?" Miguel nodded. "Years ago. Not much lately." Devin offered him half a sandwich. "Might need an extra set of hands tomorrow, if you're up for it." Miguel took the sandwich. Said nothing. But inside, something stirred. It wasn't the sandwich. It was something heavier. Recognition. That afternoon, while repainting an exterior wall, a black car pulled up across the street. At first, Miguel didn't notice. He was focused on leveling the fresh coat. But then Travis called out softly, "Hey. You've got a visitor." Miguel turned. From the back of the car stepped Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She was dressed simply, jeans, coat, notebook in hand. No entourage. No cameras, just her. She crossed the street, waved to Farley, and approached Miguel. He wiped his hands on a rag, surprised, but composed. "I heard you're back on site," she said. Miguel shrugged lightly. "They didn't say no." AOC smiled. "Sometimes not hearing a no is the beginning of everything." They stood there for a moment, just looking at the house. Fresh paint, fixed stairs, new windows. Miguel spoke softly. "It's not perfect yet. But it's getting there." "Like all of us," she replied. Later, as she prepared to leave, she addressed the crew briefly. Thanked them for their work. No politics. No campaign speech, just respect. Before she got back into the car, she turned to Miguel one last time. "You didn't just rebuild a wall, you know." He looked at her, unsure. She continued, "You rebuilt trust, in yourself. In others. That's rarer than any skill." Miguel nodded slowly. "Thank you," he said. "For not walking past me that day." She paused. "No one should have to prove they're worth seeing," she said. "But I'm glad you made it impossible to ignore." That evening, as the sun dipped below the rooftops, Miguel lingered on the sidewalk. He looked back at the house they'd worked on, the once abandoned structure now wrapped in new color, clean lines, solid fixtures. A place a family would soon call home. He pressed his palm lightly against the painted siding. "I was here," he thought. "And I left something better than I found it." Not just the house, himself. Winter faded quietly that year. Early March. The chill in the air had softened. The sky stayed lighter longer. New York, ever restless, began shedding its gray coat in exchange for something warmer, not quite spring, but the promise of it. The house in Crown Heights was finished. A fresh coat of eggshell blue covered the exterior. The broken steps were replaced. New windows let in clean, golden light. On the porch, a small wind chime moved gently in the breeze. It wasn't a showpiece. It wasn't grand. But it was whole, and Miguel stood at the curb, watching as a family climbed the steps for the first time, two kids racing to claim bedrooms, their mother wiping tears before unlocking the front door. A caseworker stood nearby, handing over a welcome folder, answering questions, and no one looked at Miguel, and that was okay. He wasn't there to be seen, that he was there because he had helped someone else be seen. Inside the house, a small event was underway. A few representatives from the community center, the housing initiative, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez herself. She stood in the living room, speaking quietly to the gathered guests. This project didn't succeed because of big donations or headlines, she said. It succeeded because of hands. Because of second chances. Because someone like Miguel Ruiz decided to show up. She looked across the room. Miguel stood in the back, out of frame, leaning against a freshly painted door frame. He didn't wave. Didn't nod, but their eyes met, and it was enough. Later, as the event wrapped up, Jasmine approached him with a stack of papers. They want you on payroll next month, she said. Full-time? Not just temp. He took the papers slowly. I've never worked on paper before, he joked as she smiled. It's about time. They sat together on the front steps for a moment. No noise. Just the soft creak of the wind chime and the sound of kids laughing upstairs. You ever think this would happen? She asked. Miguel stared ahead, quiet. I thought maybe I'd get warm, he said. Maybe eat regularly. Sleep inside. He paused, but this? He gestured at the house. This feels like I've left a fingerprint on something real. That evening, back at the community center dorm, Miguel sat at his desk, yes, his desk now, and pulled out a notebook. For the first time in months, he wrote again. They say money changes lives. But it wasn't money that saved me. It was a moment. A conversation. Someone stopped walking long enough to see me. And I learned how to see myself again. He closed the notebook. Folded the urban renewal offer letter. Put it in the drawer. Then he did something he hadn't done in years. He lay down, closed his eyes, and slept without fear. Final narration. In a city of millions, Miguel Ruiz was just one man, unhoused, unnoticed, nearly forgotten until someone saw him, until he remembered how to see himself, and in that quiet remembering, he rebuilt not just his life, but the lives of those who would come after, because sometimes, the strongest foundation is a second chance.